Our next speaker is Carrie Meek Gallagher. Carrie. So Carrie is our regional director of the Department of Environmental Conservation, and she has an onerous task of dealing with all of us and trying to make us do the right thing. So Carrie, thank you so much for coming.
Oh yeah, I'll try to just speak from up here. Hopefully everyone can hear me fine. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'm going to try to bring the room up a little bit because I feel like that was a really gloom and doom way to start off the morning. I mean, first of all, there's 80 people who have chosen to spend a day or part of their day talking about recycling and other solid waste issues, but focusing primarily on recycling here on Long Island, right? So that shows that there's enough interest, and that will, hopefully, to pull that technical knowledge and the technical solutions together and put them into place. So as Larry said, I'm going to talk a little bit about, how I think we got to this situation. I mean, I think you know, but I'll throw some statistics out there, talk about what the DEC is doing, and talk about what we collectively, I think, are also doing. And I see a number of folks in the room who've been part of that recent collective initiative to try to address both recycling and solid waste issues on the island. So, I'm the regional director here for DEC, which means that in addition to solid waste, that's just one of the many environmental issues I have to tackle on a regular basis. I did just want to point out, I know he's on the agenda later, but we are very fortunate to have our division director of materials management, Dave Vitale, here from central office. Dave gets the gold star for the division director who visits Long Island the most. And I always like to remind him, because I encourage it, it's really helpful to have support when you have the region and central office working, in lockstep on these issues. You can get a lot more done. And thank you for inviting DEC to be here this morning. I'm actually supposed to be in Albany in 2.5 hours, but I informed them that I will be slightly late for that appointment. Because it was more important to be here this morning and be here with you and talk to you and have a chance to interact a bit than be sitting up in central office for the entire time. So, as you kind of been made aware, New York is one of the many states that are now experiencing difficulties in recycling due to that significant downturn in the global market for recyclables. Most severe for mixed paper, and it's impacting other recyclables as well now. And really, how did we get here, right? So we know we've talked about China, but it started about 4 years ago. China implemented their Green Fence initiative, which severely curtailed the acceptance of. They started putting bans on plastics, unsorted mixed papers, and coming up with much more stringent standards for the amount of contamination they would allow in the recyclables sent over there. And then in 2017, it really got exacerbated with the National Sword Policy, and it expanded the restrictive policies to much further into the plastics market. So, and that's now created this ripple effect that we're feeling across the world and significantly reducing the acceptance of those imported recyclables, straining the global recycling markets. So here's a couple of statistics to throw at you. The new policies have tightened the acceptable contamination rate for imported recyclables, such as paper, to 0.5%. So in this context, contamination means non-recyclable materials, such as broken glass, organic waste, thin plastics. These all get into recyclable waste stream. And it makes the material unacceptable for processing and reduces their value. So, and this will kind of feed into when we talk about the issue that we were having a single stream here locally, right? And China had domestic reasons for enacting these policies, right? They wanted to clean up their own poorly performing, environmentally damaging facilities and consolidate their industry. So maybe they don't have that crying Indian yet, but as the economics, as the middle class and upper class in China become aware of these environmental concerns, I think they're starting to get more, some pushback domestically themselves on cleaning up their environment. They had been processing between 40 and 50% of the U.S. paper recyclable feedstock. So now they're not taking that amount of paper paper. We do have some other countries like India and Vietnam that have increased their market share of mixed paper, so it's lessening the impact, but even they're starting to tighten up as well. And there's some remaining capacity in the U.S. for mixed paper processing, but most of the manufacturers in the Northeast have either relocated or closed up shop. So consequently, as we all know, and especially the municipal folks in the room know well, that the cost for recyclables, so the material price has fallen, but the cost to collect the recyclables has increased. So it's really starting to place a burden and a strain on municipal budgets when they look at how they're going to deal with this issue moving forward. However, on a positive note, we're not yet experiencing widespread issues with material storage or disruptions in collection. There have been some of these local concerns, so I'm just going to walk through some of the recent local concerns. I think most of you are aware, but we'll just throw them out there. The town of Brookhaven, back in 2014, switched to single-stream collection, and they started experiencing problems with cross-contamination and the quality of their recyclables. And the towns of Smithtown, Huntington, and Southold also switched to single-stream collection around that time, and they had started sending all their materials, the recyclables, to the town of Brookhaven MRF, the material recovery facility. So eventually, the Brookhaven MRF just could not keep up with the volume, right? And the strict standards, the quality, the strict standards adopted by China. So the company running the MRF filed for bankruptcy in 2018. As a result, here we are, 2019, and there was this switch, which I know has confused a lot of the consumers. The town switched back to dual stream collection. So, thank you. They now have, so now Brookhaven and Southold have an intermunicipal agreement with Smithtown to manage their recyclables. Huntington's reverted to dual stream also, but they're not, and Oyster Bay, and it's continuing single stream but without the glass. So you have kind of this right now confusion in the municipalities, how they're going to handle it moving forward. There's kind of these interim solutions. You have confusion among the consumers and people. What we don't want to see happen, of course, is people say, with recycling. So, and as Larry had mentioned, we've reduced the types of plastics that are being collected. So now the plastic collections really just focuses on numbers 1, 2, and 3. You used to be able to go all the way up through number 7 in most places, so that's kind of been an issue as well. On this topic, DEC has recently held stakeholder meetings across the whole state to discuss the recycling market situation and really helped identify a bunch of issues that weren't immediate examination. So one is the contamination and content of recyclables, 2, the lack of markets and infrastructure for certain materials, and 3, the needed improvements in our collective education and outreach efforts. So with respect to education and outreach, and I'm thinking, hopefully this is something that everyone in the room can get on board with and will be participating in. DC is engaging with all stakeholders and trying to develop kind of that consistent education and outreach program. So you want all New Yorkers, and especially in local areas, to be getting the same message and understand, what they can recycle, what they can't recycle, how clean things need to be. Just some of those basic issues that we know have been coming up. What should be excluded, having kind of which collection containers are acceptable. And this all goes back to something Carl had brought up, that, the state and others have really done a great job in inspiring New Yorkers to recycle over the last 25 years. That's essentially when these recycling programs went into place and really started. Perhaps almost too good a job, because one of the issues that was identified during these stakeholder meetings is aspirational recycling or wish cycling. So, as Carl mentioned, people just want to kind of put everything, I won't say throw it away, but they think, everything to be recyclable. They think, if I put it in the recycling container, it will magically get recycled or reused, or, it's going to go away in a good way. It's not going to be polluting or contaminating because I'm recycling, and that's a good thing. So, unfortunately, because people are putting everything and anything in the recycling containers, it creates problems on the handling and operational side. So, because materials are coming in that can't actually be recycled or can't be processed in the material in the MRFs. So, that's something that has to be addressed. Now, to try to address that, and this gets to what are some of the solutions, right, is DC is working with everybody, business community, local governments, environmental community, to standardize this messaging in a new campaign called Recycle Right New York. And the goal is to reduce contamination in the recyclable market and, of course, to reduce waste and encourage more recycling and more reuse. So and in general, over the past year, essentially our entire social media campaign within the Division of Materials Management has been focused on recycling and organics diversion. So we have hundreds of posts about waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and organics diversion, and of course celebrating 25 years of having these recycling laws in place. And we can provide that information. I'll be talking a little bit more about that and how we can share that information with you. But basically an outreach toolkit is in development right now. It's going to be put up on the agency website, and it's going to be available to remind municipalities and everyone else of the continued importance of waste reduction, even in these kind of confusing times as to what's going on. Reuse, source separation, and overall recycling, and kind of help people understand how can you become part of recycling in New York. So it was really out of one of these stakeholder work groups that we developed this year-long campaign. And we think that it's going to be able to be used at all levels. The state can use it, municipalities can use it, not-for-profits can use it, businesses can use it if they want. We're also interested in, we're researching and we're interested in ideas, new ways to promote and expand existing recycling markets and develop new markets. So we're going to continue on evaluating those secondary materials market enhancement opportunities, and it's something that really, when you talk about issues concerning marketability of very specific materials, that's one of the concerns that has come up repeatedly. So, for instance, one of the materials, and this was talked about a little bit before, that's been identified is glass. So while it may not be as evil as plastic in terms of environmental impacts long term, it is a challenge in terms of can you collect it, can you market it, what can be done with it. There's only so much space. One of the challenges we have on the island, of course, that maybe other communities don't have is we're 3 million people on an island. We're densely populated. There's not a lot of space to create additional storage for these types of materials. And then you have the issue of moving those materials at some point. We're an island. There's only so many ways on and off. So right now, glass that's processed in the existing MRFs, it's difficult to market back into container glass or fiberglass because of that high level of contamination you're getting from props, from labels, from grit. So really that single stream collection has created a real challenge for glass. It's one of the primary contaminants in mixed paper collection. When you have everything mixed together, metal, glass, and plastic. And so some of the alternatives for glass management could be to include facilities to clean collected glass for high-end manufacturing into containers or fiberglass, and possibly providing incentives for state and municipal utility construction projects to specify and expand the use of glass aggregate in various projects such as road construction. So again, it's kind of this notion of a BUD, right, that we talk about, a beneficial use determination at DEC. What are the ways that some of these materials could be beneficially reused, and how do we encourage that to happen? So one of the issues, and I think this is also maybe going to be addressed a little bit later in the program by David, luckily by David, not by me, but I'll just throw it out there for now. Because of those cross-contamination challenges, you have municipalities, some of the local municipalities, Brookhaven, Smithtown, and Oyster Bay, they've decided to stop collecting glass, or they've set up separate drop-off stations where residents can bring their glass. Southold operates their residential drop-off-based program on their pay-as-you-throw collection method, and they recently restarted the drop-off for glass. So the challenge here for the municipalities and from DEC's perspective as the regulator is that under New York State General Municipal Law, Section 120AA, one of everyone's favorite sections, DEC has had to inform these municipalities that the exclusion of glass from your regular recyclable collection program has to now be justified by an economic market analysis, and it has to be conducted in accordance with the provisions of our technical guidance memorandum, TAGM SW 9206. So, and then you have to submit that to DEC for consideration. But like I said, David will go into more of those details later fun and take your questions. So we did have a very good stakeholders meeting here on glass recycling on January 10th, and various glass recycling options were discussed, and there was a really productive exchange. So I think we have some kind of light at the end of the tunnel there if we can keep the momentum going on working together. I think that we have political will right now to try to look at some of those different technical solutions. One of the challenges, of course, is going to be here on the island. One of the things, because we know that no one recommendation or any entity acting alone is going to address all of Long Island's waste management problems. We need local, regional, state, and national solutions. So one of the things that has happened over the last year is that we've been convening this Long Island Solid Waste Leadership Council. And I see many folks in the audience who have participated. Thank you for your continued participation, because the council was really developed to harness the working knowledge and energy of municipal and private solid waste professionals to initiate a proactive strategy for future management of solid waste on Long Island. And one of those goals has to be moving towards a zero waste solution, right? We may never get there. I think the idea, the reality of getting to zero waste, or maybe having that, I don't know if that's part of that circular economy idea, it is particularly challenging, but we should at least have that goal. What are the steps we can take to get us closer to zero waste, especially because we are an island? And the challenges of transportation are larger than in other places, and the space issues of storage are larger than in other places. And we have a sole source aquifer. We want to make sure we're not contaminating that. So the council has been really invaluable. There were 7 committees created as part of that council. The waste transportation, big issue. Dredge materials management. I know any of the municipal entities in the room know what a challenge that is. Recycling, which I'll come back to in a minute. Construction and demolition debris management. So everyone's been hearing about illegal dumping. Storage of material. We have a lot of this material being stored, and too much of it being stored and not being able to be reused productively. Vegetative organic waste, which is, of course, compost and mulch. This has been a big issue that everyone's been hearing about. Ash management, because we do end up, there's a large percentage of the municipal solid waste on the island that is converted waste to energy from waste. Is that what I'm supposed to say now? Energy from waste. And then it produces ash, which then has to be taken somewhere, put somewhere. And storm debris management, which of course became highlighted after Superstorm Sandy on the island, is how do we deal with that material that's generated. So all of those committees have come up with recommendations. They're going to be submitting those to the DEC. It's perfect timing because it dovetails with the state's efforts to update its solid waste management plan. So all of those recommendations will be sent to us to be considered as part of that update to the solid waste management plan. But getting back to recycling, because that's the committee that is the focus of today's topic. And I really want to say, I'm really pleased to report that the recycling committee has made several recommendations that we're already tackling. They're already underway. So this effort is already producing, fruit. And one of the things is that in a very short time, Leisha Jacobs also here from DEC. Next time we'll launch Genesee, our regional engineer for materials management and air, and also I know I saw Syed, yes, and Syed Rahman, our regional material and management solid waste engineers here as well. And Leisha is pulled together a meeting of all the recycling coordinators on Long Island. So on April 4th, DEC will be hosting a meeting of all the recycling coordinators. And what we want to do is actually convert that. We want that to become a standing committee that meets routinely to address the current recycling challenges. And then it should continue to meet routinely. Maybe we won't have to meet as frequently once we've solved some of these problems a little bit. But I think part of the issue is that we need to just continue to meet and talk about these things and figure what's happening, what's going on in the changing marketplace, and how can we collectively, the state, the municipalities, the business sector, solve the problems for the region, for the island, and of course from David's perspective for the whole state. And maybe we can once again lead the state in certain ways. Long Island has a solid history of being the first in a lot of environmental solutions. Suffolk County has put the fee on plastic bags early on, and the bottle bill originated here on Long Island. I mean, there's just a lot of things that have started. There's a lot of interest in protecting the environment here on the island. So I think we could once again kind of lead the way in some of these solid waste solutions as well. So that was number one, the recycling coordinators. Number two, we've been talking to the towns about interest in meeting with PACE, which is a New Jersey glass recycling company, about possibly accepting municipally collected glass recyclables to provide an outlet for what to do with those, all the glass that's kind of piling up now with the municipalities. And the third thing, which really goes even beyond recycling, we realized when we created those 7 committees under the council, we were missing a committee, right? We really needed a standing committee on waste reduction. And so I'm happy to announce that committee's been formed. It's being chaired by Ken Pritchard, who is here today, Anthony Kaur, who I'm not seeing in the audience unless he's hiding. Oh, Anthony, there you are back there. So thank you to Ken and Anthony for taking up that challenge. And I think they're looking for volunteers for the committee. So feel free to visit them and say, hey, I'm interested in working on waste reduction on the island. So just to wrap it up, it is DEC's goal to continue to move forward despite these challenges and to lead the nation. And from my perspective, Long Island lead the state to lead the nation in responding to the international challenges and changes in the recycling markets. So DEC is committed, 100% committed, I'd say 110% committed, and Dave's going to smile and nod, yeah. In improving recycling across the state, assisting municipalities to improve waste management, generate green jobs, prevent pollution, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and simply put, we got to stay the course. We have 25 good years of success in recycling in New York State. We have to move forward and not backwards. And I know that I can count on everyone in this room to help us do that. Thank you. So, any questions? Or you can ask Dave later.
You mentioned number of green plastics would be accepted.
Oh, no one's accepting the number 3 plastics? All right.
Not in Brook.
Not anywhere on the island? All right, so I might have, number 5. Numbers 1, 2, and 5 are being accepted? Okay. All right, well, thank you for that correction.
You talked about they're having the recycling manager starting to meet and have a standing meeting. Are you going to do that with municipal leaders to deal with the waste management issue on Long Island?
Yeah, so part of what we've done with the Long Island Solid Waste Leadership Council is we've invited all the municipalities to participate in that. So if you feel that we've missed you somehow, let me know. I know that everyone's been asked or invited and encouraged to participate. Not every municipality has been as involved as others, I'll say. But we were happy to have everyone because I really do think that the challenges we're facing, especially because Long Island, once again is special in New York State, where we have planning units down to the, or mostly at the town level, but in some cases, city and town level, whereas the rest of parts of the state is mostly at the county level, correct, Jim? So we need the municipalities and others to come together and maybe think about, are there some solutions that are going to be intra-regional solutions so that we have the towns joining together? Do we need to look at, think about public-private partnerships in different ways? What are some of the ideas out there where we can really tackle this problem collectively where it's going to be economically feasible for the island and reduce the overall environmental impacts?
Just curious, maybe it's later in the day or somebody else is going to talk, or David's going to talk about it, so I don't want to steal his thunder. But are you guys going to talk about the latest on what's going on with the bottle bill and how maybe some of these comments or other things are going to get percolated up? Is that bottle bill going to be talked about at all?
The
I can
Dave,
do
you
that.
want to talk about
My-
the
Okay,
bottle?
all right.
If you like.
Just add it to the list.
Add it to Dave. Dave gets to talk about all the super controversial issues, and I get to be the cheerleader for working together to solve the problems. Yeah.
Carrie, I'm Andrew from actually Onondaga County.
Oh, okay.
Kind of a distant cousin in the room here today.
Yeah. You have some
but
solutions for us?
Some of us in this, we're trying like the rest of us all together now. Like you said, team effort.
Yeah.
But some of us in the room from both the public and private sector had the opportunity within the past couple weeks to visit with some of our state elected representatives in Albany. And obviously, we all have an obligation, I think, to educate them about the current recycling crisis. And I think that's important because it was clear that many of them were frankly very, very unaware of what's going on that's confronting their local communities. So while we're definitely trying to be more engaged, I guess my question for you or for Dave is to what extent is the DEC perhaps reaching out both to the governor's office and to the Senate and Assembly ENCON committees to make sure that they're aware of really the very extreme financial challenges that we're under, please?
Yeah, I mean, I know the governor's office, this is a topic they're very engaged on, and as is our commissioner's office. I think, right now, the timing is such that the focus is on getting a budget passed. So it may be that once the budget is passed and what our reform is going to be, we can revisit the idea of how do we, explain this to them. I know, there's only so much attention you can get when everyone's in the midst of thinking about getting a budget passed. But it's very much on our minds is how do we communicate that so that when we're proposing solutions, especially when we're talking about our updating the statewide solid waste management plan, and we want to make sure they understand why these ideas are being put forward. But if you have ideas on how we can do a better job at reaching them, let me know. Sometimes they actually, sometimes I think they listen more to constituents than the agencies who they think work for them. I mean, we do work for them, but I mean, sometimes it's just like if your wife tells you something, maybe you're not going to listen to her. But if your friend tells you,
I listen to her. I
and she'll say, "But I told you that 20 times." But So, but I think that is a good point. It's how do we, again, it's our collective education outreach effort. Who are all the different spokespeople we need? Who's the best deliverer of which message? That's part of what we can be thinking about.
I'm actually also not from this region. I'm coming in from New York City, but I'm curious, who initiated the idea of this regional task force? And because it's a little bit unusual, isn't it, that DEC is, as the regulator, is actually bringing everybody together to talk about solutions. And is that happening in other regions?
Well, not yet, but we're thinking that once again, Long Island is going to lead the charge in how we might have to think about things differently, given the current, national and global situation. I hear what you're saying. I think, again, because Long Island is unique in so many ways from the rest of the state, that we do have to think about those things differently. And sometimes it takes the regulator who needs the expertise from folks in the field, because we're not the ones running the solid waste operations, and we're not trying to make money doing that, and we're not. So I think that it's helpful to have not a completely adversarial relationship with the regulated community, but to try to tap into their expertise as well. And again, the timing was such that it seemed really opportune because the state was going to be launching the update to their state solid waste management plan. So to start encouraging that dialogue earlier, just made a lot of sense to us. Sai, do you want to add to that?
I just want to add to that Long Island has some unique issues. We don't have landfills. We have to export at least 40% of the solid waste off island. We have transportation issues. So there are various issues with recycling organics, as much could be an issue. So because of all this, Carrie took that initiative. I really applaud Carrie that she took that initiative to gather with the private and public partnership and come up with a committee and look for a solution for Long Island. We have a big issue of waste management on Long Island. That's the primary focus on this Long Island.
we have big issues in New York City as well. I'm just curious if you're so DEC actually initiated this, and have you heard from your colleagues in other regions if they're going to follow suit? Or?
Well, I think Dave's been talking to them as he travels around the state. I mean, again, like, he's a very engaged division director within the agency. He travels to every region, you know, constantly. He came to every single one of our leadership council meetings. He's been to all the recycling stakeholder meetings. I think he's hosting all these solid waste management plan update meetings. So I don't know. I mean, Dave, you might be able to say, you know, talk about if it's come up, but I know we kind of talked about maybe this is something that would make sense in other parts of the state as well.
Right, it's always something we have been striving for. There's,
Dave, you gotta yell.
okay, it's something we are always striving for. We have 9 regions across the state. There's different challenges in different regions, and there's different levels of interest and different levels of knowledge in different regions. Region 1, as I had said, there's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of interest, there's a lot of expertise, and there's a lot of willingness to be involved in these kind of processes. So we are trying to develop some of that interest in many of our other regions. We haven't been quite as successful as we are in Region 1, but a lot of that is due in large part to all of you here in this room, in addition to Carrie spearheading it. So I guess the answer is yes, but I don't expect it to be as aggressive and as fast as it happened here. And so we're hoping to draw in more of that through the state solid waste management plan effort. In Region 2, where you're from, is New York City. It's just New York City is our entire Region 2. So the relationship would be in large part with the Department of Sanitation, and we have different relationships with different parts of the sanitation, so that creates a different, unique set of challenges. But we are trying, but as Carrie says, Region 1 is leading the way.
Yeah. So if you think it's a good idea and you want to see it happen in Region 2, Steve Zahn's the regional director. He's my buddy. Just call him up and say, hey, I met this really awesome regional director from Region 1. Carrie me out there. I want you to do everything she's doing.
I think the simple answer to Tom would be that the squeaky wheel got the grease this time.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah. Oh, Michael. I pushed everything back. I told him to be there, so I have 10 more minutes. Not that we have to take it. I'm just saying if there are any more questions, I can hang out with you for 10 more minutes.
I actually just wanted to make another comment to the points that Syed was making. I think Region 1 is unique for the management challenges we have, but also I think is unique around the state with respect to the reliance and the interdependence of industry and municipalities. Nothing will get done on Long Island unless both of those entities are working with the regulator as a manager and a planner to really solve these problems. And in different parts of the state, or the city is the city. And if you're upstate, there's county authorities. We don't have those kinds of entities here. So this reliance and this partnership makes a big difference. And this council has been, I think, a voice for that.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? If not, I'm off to all of you. And I wish I could stay.
So before I introduce the next person, I just want to say, Carrie mentioned the problem of ash. I'd like to point out the most beautiful building on South Campus of Stony Brook University is our boathouse out here. It's built out of 75% ash, and Frank Rothel has volunteered to take people that are interested in seeing it during the lunch break to go over and inspect it being around. I got to say, DEC never approved it. It's a research project. Stony Brook University took 20 years to put it on a map because it didn't exist, and we couldn't get it painted for 20 years because it didn't exist. So anyway, it's a very interesting phenomena, and it's in Ripley's Believe It or Not.